There's one time prophecy from the Qur'an that I've been able to find, and you're welcome to search the Qur'an for others. But this one has actually been confirmed by the beloved guardian in God Passes By. It's chapter 32, verse 5. It's the one that begins, "And God ruleth from the heavens down to the earth, and all shall attain his presence on a day whose length is 1,000 years." And in several translations they add, "as ye reckon," meaning 1,000 of our years, not 1,000 years of God's years, which would be interminable, but by a mere 1,000 years by our count. And if we take the time from when the 12th Imam appeared and went into hiding in the year 260 of the Mohammedan calendar, and we simply add 1,000 lunar years to that, it resolves again at 1260 AH, which again is 1844. So very neatly, the Quran and the Bible are interchangeable documents, holy texts that guide us without fail, unless we fail. And there's one final time prophecy I've listed on the chart, which is from the book of Revelation, chapter 20, verse 2, which mentions how that Satan will be bound 1,000 years. And we're going to put that beginning at 1863, and then we'll come back to it at a later time. Now, that pretty much completes the time prophecy chart that I've been able to put together. And again, you're welcome to do your own research. It's quite pleasurable and enjoyable to research these holy books and come up with your own time prophecies. I would encourage you. And now I want to move on to some prophecies that you might not realize are prophecies, but are, in fact, I've been able to find all the central figures of the Baha'i faith. So let's look at Isaiah chapter 9, verses 6 and 7, two very popular verses, or probably one more popular than the other. Starting with verse 6, and I'll just read it, both of them. "For unto us a child is born, unto us a son is given, and the government shall be upon his shoulder. And his name shall be called Wonderful, Counselor, the Mighty God, the Everlasting Father, the Prince of Peace. Of the increase of his government and peace there shall be no end, upon the throne of David, and upon his kingdom, to order it, and to establish it with judgment and with justice from henceforth even forever. The zeal of the Lord of hosts will perform this." Now, I'm pretty sure it's clear to you that all the 5 central figures of the Baha'i faith have been foretold in this prophecy. But if it's not crystal clear, let's give it a shot and see what we can find. It begins, "For unto us a child is born, unto us a son is given." And the question I always like to ask here is, what is the first thing you notice about this passage from verse 6? And the answer is, "Unto us a child is born, unto us a son is given." And what you've probably overlooked, because Christians tend to own this prophecy. They say that this is a prophecy about Jesus because he's the Son, and it's a reference to the Son. But if you look at this passage, what you notice first is that, yes, indeed, it is a reference to the Son. And yes, it is, Jesus does partially fulfill this prophecy. But the passage makes reference to 2 divine beings. "For unto us a child is born, unto us a son is given." Reference is being made to 2 different beings. Now, a lot of Christian scholars will say, well, no, the child who is born is also the son who is given. But the verse doesn't say that, and it requires some extrapolation, some interpretation to reach that conclusion. But the obvious interpretation is that 2 divine beings will come. A child who will be born among us, and he will give us his son. So the child, we say here is Jesus, is the son. Child who is born is Bahá'u'lláh, and the son who is given is Abdul-Baha. And what greater gift to mankind has there ever been than the gift of Bahá'u'lláh, of his son Abdul-Baha, to us? I assure you there's been none. So let's move on. The next passage says, "And the government shall be upon his shoulder." Now it's true that when Jesus, during his crucifixion march, was forced to carry his cross upon his shoulder, so in that sense Jesus does literally fulfill the Roman government being upon his shoulder while he carried the cross. There is a corollary in the Baha'i faith, in the history of the Baha'i religion, when Baha'u'lláh was arrested and imprisoned and thrown into the Siyachal, or the Shah's black pit, the horrid, underground, pestilential dungeon hell hole that he was forced to dwell in for 4 months for no valid reason. And each night his jailers would chain a 100-pound chain around his neck and shoulders that forced him. Inside this underground hellhole was dark, it was dank, there was no light, filled with thieves, highwaymen and assassins and other nefarious criminals in the Shah's domain, just the worst refuse of the world. There were no facilities, and the stench was unbearable, and the ground was covered with filth and vermin. And this is where our Lord was forced to dwell for 4 months. And this chain, when placed around his neck, was 100 pounds, and Baha'u'lláh was a man of short stature. When he wore this chain, it brought him closer, of course, to the filth and the foul stench. And Baha'u'lláh had choice words about his time in the Sea of Chal, which we'll go into at another time. In any event, there is a complete corollary where upon his shoulder for 4 months, the government placed their burden. Now you could say, of course, that the government shall be upon his shoulder, meaning that he shall shoulder a new government. And, of course, Jesus brought no government, but he did suffer from the government. So in that sense, both Baha'u'lláh and Jesus have fulfilled these prophecies. The rest of the passage says, "And his name shall be called Wonderful, Counselor, the Mighty God, the Everlasting Father, the Prince of Peace." And again, what's the first thing you notice about this string of names? The first one being wonderful. It should be a great thing. I'm always telling people, this is a great day. If it's the first time you've heard that Baha'u'lláh has come, how great this day is. This is the first time you've heard the name of Baha'u'lláh proclaimed. Some people, it's like, when they mention Baha'u'llah's name, it's like pulling teeth, you would think. They go, forget that, it's wonderful. They should be happy. So his name's a Wonderful Counselor. And here's an interesting one, the Mighty God. Now, if you look in the Bible, you'll see there are a lot of references to the Mighty God. So the Mighty God is a title of Michael the Great Prince, the Everlasting Father, this Wonderful Counselor. The Mighty God is the title of this promised one. Now, Jesus, of course, was known as the Son of God, and the next title is the Everlasting Father. Again, Jesus was known as the Son. He said on one occasion, "I'm in the Father, and the Father is in me," so in many ways he is the Father. But his title was the Son of God, nonetheless, because you must know the Son before you can know the Father. And this is a prophecy of the Father coming. It doesn't say the Father and the Son will come. Well, actually, it does in the first verse. It says the Father will come, the child will be born, and he'll give us his Son. So they'll appear together. The days of Jesus, only the Son appeared, and he spoke of his Father who was in heaven. But in the Baha'i history, the Father and the Son have appeared together and literally fulfilled this prophecy from A to Z. So these titles refer to the Father, and the last title being the Prince of Peace. Now, Jesus, of course, was not a prince, and he did not bring peace to the world. He brought peace of mind to those who were able to find salvation through Jesus. But again, he did not bring peace, and he was not a prince. Baha'u'lláh, of course, his father was a prince in the court of the Shah, and Baha'u'llah's father died when he was at a young age, and the post was offered to Baha'u'lláh, this princedom, but Baha'u'lláh, of course, rejected it because he had a higher calling, and everyone recognized that. It's not that he said he had a higher calling, it's that everyone else said that Baha'u'lláh had a higher calling. And Baha'u'lláh at the time was known across the land as the father of the poor, because he would always go out and help the poor and cheer the downtrodden. Now, verse 7 begins, and this is where it departs from Christian history. "Of the increase of his government and peace there shall be no end." And there's just no getting around this verse. Jesus brought no government. He said nothing about a government, a divine government. The only words he addressed to government were when he said, "Render unto Caesar that which is Caesar, and unto God that which is God's." That was the only reference he made to government, was that you should be obedient to the government and give them whatever belongs to them, and to remember that whatever belongs to God, which is your heart, your soul, your love, give that to God. And here this verse says, "Of the increase of his government and peace there shall be no end." We're still waiting for the Christian, not the Christian, but for the Christ government to appear, let alone increase. But in the Baha'i history, there is undeniable proof, there's written proof that Baha'u'lláh in his writings has ordained just such a government as foretold in the book of Isaiah. And he's said it will last for 500,000 years. There shall be no end. And there's two things here. It says of his government and peace. So Jesus brought no government, and his religion did not bring peace to the world. Now, of course, at the present day, there's no peace in the world either. But Baha'u'lláh has brought a government, and he's brought teachings designed to bring peace to the world through world unity, the unity of the human race, and the unity of religions. These things will take time, but the promise is that the peace will come. It won't be easy. Now, Baha'u'llah's government, of course, is the House of Justice. He ordains and makes several references to this House of Justice, that all things will be referred to it. Baha'u'lláh, of course, is a prophet. He is omniscient. He can see into the future, can see all things in the past. He can see into the souls of people. He's everything that we are not. And so when he ordains the House of Justice, it's an elected body among the Baha'is themselves. And so these are not prophets when they get elected to this position. They have a special position, of course, a special station as a minister of the House of Justice or a member of the House of Justice. But they're not prophets, and they're only guided when they meet and invoke the name of Baha'u'lláh, when they begin their meetings as the House of Justice. Because Baha'u'lláh promises in his writings that he will guide the House of Justice and that whatever they do is of him. And it's very interesting because there's no clear understanding, because we're not members of the House of Justice and we don't go and sit and watch their meetings, of how this system of divine governance works. But it's interesting because it's unfolding before our very eyes. So the government is the House of Justice, right? And we should move on to the next verse, right? Because Baha'u'lláh ordained House of Justice, right? Okay, let's move on. And oh yes, there's the guardianship. When Baha'u'lláh ascended to the next world in 1892, he left a will, his Kitab-i-Ad, his Book of the Covenant, where he appointed his son Abdul-Baha as his successor and gave him full authority to interpret his words and to make other appointments, and alluded to this position of the guardianship. Abdul-Baha, in his turn, now what's quite interesting is that there has been no being like Abdul-Baha across the vast stretches of time. He is the son of Baha'u'lláh. He's not a prophet per se. He's not justified in claiming that he's the prophet. But we're not justified, is what the Guardian said. Whether he is he's as close to the prophet as can possibly be. The Bab, of course, who was the herald of Baha'u'lláh as a prophet. Abdul-Baha had prophetic vision. He could see into the souls of people. He could see into the future, but never laid claim to the station of a prophet. And of course, Baha'u'lláh said another prophet will not come ere the passage of a full 1,000 years. But a lot of people made uproar that they would link Abdul-Baha as the son, and he's claiming to be the prophet, when the writings say no prophet will appear before another 1,000 years. So there's a lot of things we need to sift through, and to recognize the high station of Abdul-Baha. Of course, he's not one of us. Remember that. He's so far above us that we can't begin to comprehend his station. Even Baha'u'lláh refers to him as the mystery of God. But his title, Abdul-Baha, of course, is the servant of glory, the glorious servant. His highest aspiration was to be of service to all mankind, and he's our guide and our exemplar. So if we take him just at his title, we should be servants to all mankind too, and then try to comprehend his station before we venture into or foray into the field of how high is the station of Abdul-Baha, as if we know everything. And Abdul-Baha, when he ascended in 1921, he left his will and testament, establishing the position of the guardian and appointing his eldest grandson as the first guardian. Now, his eldest grandson, of course, we talk about Abdul-Baha being the son of Baha'u'lláh, and his station being so high as the son of Baha'u'lláh. No prophet in the past ever had a son, and I've ventured to say that no prophet in the future will ever have a son. But it's true that Abdul-Baha himself never had a son. Now, he had 8 children, 4 of whom were males. All four males died in infancy, and the daughters survived and lived to be adults. But even Abdul-Baha didn't have a son. His eldest grandson was Shoghi Effendi, and Abdul-Baha, in his will, appointed Shoghi Effendi to this position of the guardian, which Abdul-Baha established, ordained in his writings, in his will and testament. So here we have, this is how high the station of Abdul-Baha is, because Baha'u'lláh ordains the government and Abdul-Baha fills it out and completes it. The Bab, in his position as herald of Baha'u'lláh, never said one word about the covenant of Baha'u'lláh or the government of Baha'u'lláh. So that's quite a difference. So these are the things that Abdul-Baha did that the Bab didn't do. They're the things that the Bab did that Abdul-Baha didn't do. And aren't we lucky to be able to witness all this? So the government of Baha'u'lláh is the House of Justice and the Guardian, and these two work together. Now, they didn't actually work together. The Guardian built up the Baha'i administrative order, and he ascended. He went to the next world in 1957 before the first House of Justice had been elected. And there was a time of great turmoil and trouble for the Baha'i community because we didn't expect this to happen. And where was the House of Justice? What does it all mean? And fortunately, we had the Hands of the Cause who were able to find in the writings their title as the chief stewards of the faith, giving them authority to guide the Baha'i community during this interim period or interregnum period before the election of the House of Justice was able to be undertaken by the Baha'i community, the Baha'i National Assemblies across the world in 1963. So there was a 6-year period where a lot of things happened that showed to us how much of a struggle adhering to the teachings of Baha'u'lláh will always be. So let's go on to the next verse. Upon the throne of David and upon his kingdom. Now, David, of course, is King David, and his kingdom was the Israelite kingdom. The throne of David was in Jerusalem. So let's have a look. Upon his kingdom is Israel. What about Jerusalem? The Baha'i World Center is on Mount Carmel in Haifa. In the book of Revelation, when St. John says, "And I, John, saw the holy city, New Jerusalem, coming down from heaven, from God out of heaven," he refers to it as New Jerusalem, which, without any need for grandiose interpretation, would imply another city, a different city. Haifa, on the other hand, if you've ever been there, in particular while we were building up the terraces along the Shrine of the Bab on Mount Carmel, we employed a number of workers who were Jewish, Christian, Muslims, Arabs, people of all different religions and backgrounds. And they worked together in harmony and unity to such an extent that people noticed that what a difference between the rest of the world where everybody's trying to kill each other, and especially the Arabs always trying to bring death to Israel and that sort of thing. But in Haifa, they saw complete camaraderie and unity and love and affinity between Muslims, Jews, and Christians and Baha'is. And so they call Haifa the city of peace, of all things. Now, the reason why I bring this up is because if you look at the name Jerusalem, or Jerusalem, it in fact means the city of peace. So in this respect, upon the throne of David and upon his kingdom, the throne being Jerusalem, and Haifa being New Jerusalem, we can say that Mount Carmel and Haifa fulfill this prophecy, this passage in the prophecy. Now, the next part of the passage says, to order it and to establish it. Again, I'm reiterating, Baha'u'lláh ordained the House of Justice. Abdul-Baha ordained the guardianship, and the guardian raised up and established the Baha'i administrative order. The verse continues, with judgment and with justice, from henceforth even forever. And again, the Baha'u'lláh says that this government will endure for 500,000 years. The last verse from the passage says, the zeal of the Lord of hosts will perform this. Now this one, admittedly, I'm taking a little license, but the one who, as I said, established or raised up the Baha'i administrative order was the beloved guardian, and without his guidance, we never would have been able to do it. And the guardian, again, was given authority to interpret, but he wasn't. His position does not conflict with the House of Justice. The House of Justice is the legislative and is the main source of their authority and guidance. The guardian, of course, could interpret, which he did. His station is, again, very unique and way above us. So I won't begin to say this is what it means to be the guardian. But as it relates to this last verse, which says, the zeal of the Lord of hosts will perform this, It was the tireless effort or the zeal of the beloved guardian that brought the Baha'i administrative order into being and raised it up to the point where we could elect the House of Justice and go on from there and have the House of Justice to guide us as the central figure. And the House of Justice has repeatedly said they have no authority to appoint another guardian, which stands to reason, of course. But also, they do have the writings of the beloved guardian to refer to. So the guardian and the House of Justice rule together through the writings of the guardian, even though not physically together at the same time. Now, the reason why we don't have another guardian is when Shoghi Effendi went to the next world, he left no will and had no children. And any other axon or descendant of Baha'u'lláh, of the family of Baha'u'lláh, had all violated the covenant and been excommunicated, so they were not appointable. And it's quite interesting. I won't go into great detail about the will and testament of Abdul-Baha and how the guardian can appoint somebody else by going to the House of Justice and recommending. You can do that on your own. But it is quite fascinating that even this situation where the guardianship, the line of guardians would be terminated or broken, not terminated. Broken is the word that they use. I think there's a difference. All that has been alluded to and given as a possible scenario. And of course, whatever happens to us, we really deserve a lot worse. So we're very fortunate to have had a guardian such as Shoghi Effendi to guide us. And now we have the House of Justice. We really should be a lot more thankful and go on from there. The final point about Shoghi Effendi is his name, Shoghi. It means one who yearns, or one with zeal. And in fact, one of the pilgrims I've heard asked the beloved guardian, Shoghi Effendi, is he the zeal of the Lord of hosts mentioned in this verse? And the guardian's response was, Shoghi does not mean zeal. Now, of course, the question was not, does Shoghi mean zeal? The question to the guardian was, art thou the zeal of the Lord of hosts? So we didn't actually answer the question, is my point. And so there you have it. Now, his name's Shoghi Effendi. Everybody calls him Shoghi Effendi. It's impolite. It's disrespectful to refer to him by his first name only. Effendi is actually a title. It means like Lord or Sir. Shoghi Effendi. So we always call our beloved guardian Shoghi Effendi. We would never refer to any of the central figures of the Baha'i faith by their first name. Of course, the House of Justice doesn't have a first name. It's the House of Justice or the Universal House of Justice. Abdul-Baha is always Abdul-Baha. Baha'u'lláh is Baha'u'lláh. So there you have two little verses from Isaiah chapter 9, verses 6 and 7, where all five figures of the Baha'i faith can be found. All five central figures of the Baha'i faith can be... Oh, wait, I left out the Bab. Let's see. How can we fit the Bab in there? Let's go back to the first verse. Verse 6, for unto us a child is born, unto us a son is given. What can we do here? And let's see. Well, Abdul-Baha was given to us as a gift, right? God's greatest gift to mankind is Abdul-Baha. Baha'u'llah's greatest gift. No greater gift of Baha'u'lláh than his son, Abdul-Baha, to us. So a son can be given as a gift. Jesus, of course, was given as a sacrifice. He was suspended in the air with nails on a cross and put to death by a brutal government. And the Bab, if we look at his station, who claimed to be the promised Christ, the Messiah, and who, like Jesus, was about 25 when he declared his mission. His ministry lasted to his execution, 1844 to 1850, about 6 or 7 years, at the same length of the ministry of Jesus before he was crucified. The Bab himself also was suspended in the air with a nail, executed by a brutal government. Once again, the similarities between the Bab and Jesus are legion, and in fact, there's a lot of speculation about when Jesus was actually born, when Christmas actually is, and the verses in the Bible referring to shepherds attending their field, implying that it would be in the springtime, not in the dead of winter. So maybe it was May 23rd when the Bab declared his mission and Abdul-Baha was born, that Jesus was born. It's possible. I don't know. I don't have any authority to say that, but I'll venture a guess. So there you have it. All five central figures of the Baha'i faith: Baha'u'lláh, Abdul-Baha, the Bab, the promised Christ, House of Justice, the guardian, even the Baha'i World Center in Israel, Mount Carmel, in Haifa. You're welcome.